नंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यशोदा नंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीर वनचारी यमुना तीर वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी कुंज बिहारी गौर प्रेमानंदी जय नित्यलील प्रविष्टों विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य स्तोत्र सतज डिवाइन ग्रेस सबै चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की ताई गौर प्रेमानंदी all glories to the assembled devotees all glories to the assembled devotees all glories to the assembled devotees all glories to the lotus feet of Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayarmudirayen Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevayam Bhagavatir Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 3, Text 36. So, temporarily we've gone back to our old format and to our previous series of verses. This chapter is entitled Liberation from the Illusory Energy. Naitan mano vishati vakuta chakshuratma Pranendriyani cha yatanalam archisasvaha Shabdopi bodhaka nishedeyatma moolam Artoktamah yatra tena nisheda siddhihi Naitan mano bishati vaguta chakshuratma Pranendriyani cha yatanalam archishasvaha Shabdopi bodhaka nishedeta yatma moolam Artoktamah yatra tena nisheda siddhihi नैतन्मनो विशति वागुतचक्षुरात्मा प्राणेन्द्रियाणि च यथानलम् अर्चिषः स्वाहा शब्दोऽपि बोधक निषेधतयात्ममूलम् अर्थोक्तमाह यदृतेन निषेधसिद्धिः तन्मनो विशति वागुतचक्षुरात्मा प्राणेन्द्रियाणि च यथानलम् अर्चिषः स्वाहा शब्दोऽपि बोधक निषेधतयात्ममूलम् अर्थोक्तमाह यदृतेन निषेधसिद्धिः नैतेन्मनो विशति वागुतचक्षुरात्मा प्राणेन्द्रियाणि च यथानलम् अर्चिषः स्वाहा शब्दोऽपि बोधक निषेधतयात्ममूलम् अर्थोक्तमाह यत्र तेन निषेधसिद्धिः. Ladies. मनो विशति वागुतचक्षुरात्मा प्राणेन्द्रियाणि च यथानलमर्चिषः स्वाहा शब्दोऽपि बोधक निषेधतयात्ममूलम् अर्थोक्तमाह यत्र तेन निषेधसिद्धिः. मनो विशति वाकुतचक्षुरात्मा प्राणेन्द्रियाणि च यथानलम् अर्चिषः स्वाहा शब्दोऽपि बोधक निषेधतयात्ममूलम् अर्थोक्तमाह यत्र तेन निषेधसिद्धिः. Word for word. Na, cannot. Etat, this supreme truth. Manaha, the mind. Vishati, enter. Vak, the function of speech. Uta, nor. Chakshu, sight. Atma, intelligence. Prana, the subtle airs supporting life. Indriyani, the senses. Cha, or yata, just as. Analam, a fire. Archisaha, it sparks. Swaha, own. Shabdaha, the authoritative sound of the Vedas. Api, even. Bodhaka, being able to indicate by verbal reference. Nishedhataya, because of denying such Atma of the Supreme Soul, Moolam, basic evidence, Artha Uktam, expressed indirectly, Aha, does express, Yat Rite, without which Supreme, Na, there is not, Nisheda, of the negative statements of scripture, Siddhihi, ultimate purpose. Translation: neither the mind nor the faculties of speech, sight, intelligence, the life air, or any of the senses are capable of penetrating that supreme truth, any more than small sparks can affect the original fire from which they are generated. Not even the authoritative language of the Vedas can perfectly describe the supreme truth, since the Vedas themselves disclaim the possibility that the truth can be expressed by words. But through indirect reference, the Vedic sound does serve as evidence of the supreme truth. Since without the existence of that supreme truth, the various restrictions found in the Vedas would have no ultimate purpose. Neither the mind nor the faculties of speech, sight, intelligence, the life, air, or any of the senses are capable of penetrating that supreme truth any more than small sparks can affect the original fire from which they are generated. Not even the authoritative language of the Vedas can perfectly describe the supreme truth, since the Vedas themselves disclaim the possibility that the truth can be expressed by words. But through indirect reference, the Vedic sound does serve as evidence of the supreme truth, since without the existence of that supreme truth, the various restrictions found in the Vedas would have no ultimate purpose. Purport by the disciples of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. This is a very long purport. We're not going to we're not going to even make an attempt. This is a 7-page purport. So we're going to speak on some parts of it. The small sparks generated by a blazing fire have no power to eliminate the original fire, nor can they burn it. The quantity of heat and light in the original fire is always superior to the quantity found in the insignificant sparks. Similarly, the minute living entities generated from the internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as stated in the Vedanta Sutra, Janmadiyasya Yataha, in Bhagavad Gita, Aham Sarvasya Prabhava, Mamayvangsa Jiva Loke, Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. The minute living entities being Angshaha, or sparks of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, can never equal the Supreme Godhead in the quantity of their potency. The quantity of knowledge and bliss in the Supreme Personality of Godhead is always superior. Therefore, when a foolish conditioned soul tries to eliminate the subject matter of the highest truth with his tiny brain, he merely illuminates his own foolishness. The Personality of Godhead, a personally spoken Bhagavad Gita, which is the blazing fire of perfect knowledge that burns to ashes the insignificant speculations and theories of so-called philosophers and scientists regarding the ultimate truth. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is called Rishikesh, or the Lord of everyone's senses, because the Personality of Godhead has supreme seeing power, hearing power, touching power, smelling power, and tasting power. The living entities, in a limited sense, can also see, hear, touch, smell, and taste by the mercy of Rishikesh. This idea is expressed in the Brihat Aranyaka Upanishad 4:18. Pranasya pranam uta chakshushas chakshur uta shrotasya strotram annasyanam manaso ye mana vidahu. The supreme truth is understood to be the life air sustaining everyone's life air, the vision of everyone's eyes, the hearing power of the ear, and the sustenance of food itself. The obvious conclusion is that the supreme truth can be known by His own causeless mercy and not by our foolish attempts to bring the all-pervading truth within the insignificant boundaries of our intelligence. It is stated in the Taittiriya Upanishad 2.4.1, Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha. The descriptive power of speech fails in the realm of the supreme truth, and the speculative power of the mind cannot achieve Him. So, let's talk about this. So the Lord, just like we understood, many of this people who got COVID-19, they lost their sense of smell, right? So the nose is there, the nerves are there, but somehow they lost the sense of smell. Okay, it takes some time to come back. So similarly, somebody may have beautiful eyes, but they may be blind. Isn't that? So, just like our eyes are very limited if you think about it. When I went for my military training in Singapore, we used to go to the Brunei jungles to train. And it's like an equatorial forest, and it's like the canopies are like completely covered. Even during the day, it's kind of a little dim. So at night, you put your hands in front of you, you can't see your hands. So that's how dark it is. So your eyes are there, but you realize how imperfect your eyes are because you need the activating principle of light. So the eye is an instrument, just like if you want to measure the voltage between two terminals, you need a voltmeter, but you need electricity to energize the terminals. So similarly, all our senses, there is an activating principle. So for a blind person, he could have eyes, he could light, but still he can't see. So similarly, we may have a very brilliant brain, but we may not be able to understand the Supreme Lord, because ultimately it depends on the Lord's mercy. It talks about how the mercy principle is needed to understand the Lord. So therefore, it is said in the Brahma Samhita, Advaitam, not Advaitam, what is that verse? Advaitam. What is that? Vedeshu Durlabam Adurlabam Atma Bhakta. What is the verse beginning? Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayavvanam Cha Vedeshu Durlabam Adurlabam Atma Bhakta Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. So here in the verse itself it speaks about not even the authoritative language of the Vedas can perfectly describe the supreme truth, since the Vedas themselves disclaim the possibility that the truth can be expressed by words. So sometimes we try to, of course, how we describe Krishna is by words, right? But somebody who is completely in love with Krishna, or say for an example, somebody who has lost the faculty of speech, somebody who's dumb, who cannot speak, let's say a mother who cannot talk, but she has a child and she doesn't need the faculty of speech to kind of express her love for the child. Just by her actions, how she cares for the child, or some danger happens to the child, how she becomes frantic. So the medium of language can only go up to some point to express the Lord, features of the Lord, the qualities of the Lord. But it's actually the Lord's qualities, His name, His form. He's independent of whether we can glorify the Lord or not. The Lord's glories are always there. So since the scriptures have to be composed by words, so they also actually fall short of completely describing the Lord. Right? So it's a very, but something very amazing, but the word Krishna and Rama and Madhava or Shama said to be completely describing the Lord. That's another unique wonder, because as they say, it's no difference. So something to think about. The life air, in Ayurvedic understanding, our life is supposed to be supported by the life air, prana. Okay, so when there's some disorder in the life air, then all kind of problems starts in the body. Okay, so that is supported by the Lord. Your digestive power is supported. Somebody may have a stomach, may have the digestive juices in the stomach, but still they may not be able to digest. So there's something called Vaishvanara. There's something called Vaishvanara in the belly, which is the heat which digests food. So there's something called an activating principle, an enabling principle. All right, just like matter may be there, all the elements of matter may be there in a body, but there's no life. So you need the principle of the soul. You need the spirit to activate matter. In fact, even dull matter cannot be sustained by itself. You need the Paramatma to enter every building block of matter so that it can, the Paramatma is the one who supports this entire creation. We're not even speaking about the living force in any animate, but even in animate matter, you need the presence of the Lord to sustain it. If not, everything will disintegrate. So, something to think about on a daily basis, how we are actually completely dependent on Krishna. But because such statements of Vedic Shrutis are in themselves descriptions of the absolute truth, one may consider such Vedic statements contradictory. Therefore, in this connection, it is said, Shabdopi Bodhaka Nishedata Yatma Moolam Artoktam Aha. Although the Vedic Shruti Shabda forbids us to speculate upon the absolute truth, such restrictive injunctions indirectly constitute positive assertions of the existence of the Supreme Entity. So we have yama and niyamas, different to do and not to do in the Vedic injunctions. But that is only meaningful because of the existence of the Supreme Lord. If the Lord doesn't exist, what's the use of following rules and regulations? Because our rules and regulations is to ultimately attain the Lord. Our yamas and niyamas, what not to do and what to do, is ultimately for us to get closer to the Lord. So therefore, because of the Lord's existence, all these rules and regulations in the Vedic scriptures make sense. Therefore, in bhakti, we have sadhana bhakti, we have Vaidhi bhakti. Between sadhana bhakti is Vaidhi bhakti, there's raganuga bhakti, and then there's ragatmika bhakti, which is free of rules and regulations. But all these rules and regulations are necessary because they have to prepare our consciousness to approach the Lord. Because the Lord is purest, right? Arjuna says in the Bhagavad Gita, what is that verse? What is that verse where Krishna, Arjuna glorifies Krishna as the purest? Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Pavitram, Paramam Bhavan. Purusham Shashvatam Divyam. Pavitra, Krishna is Pavitra. Pavitra means purest. Para Brahma, Param Dhamma, Pavitram. So Krishna is purest, right? So in order to approach the purest, we also have to have that purity in our heart. If not, we cannot approach the purest. Now, our purity is very subject to contamination because we very much are very minute. So we don't have the power to prevent any contamination if we don't take precautions in preventing ourselves from contamination. So therefore, these rules and regulations are there to keep ourselves pure. But when you attain a certain state of elevated bhakti, it is said that even contaminations around you don't affect you. Right? So it's an important point, but we cannot imitate such positions. An example is, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's spiritual master, Srila Gaurakrishna Das Babaji Maharaj. He one day decided to move into a latrine and make that his bhajan kutir. And people were wondering, what is this so, it's a very dirty place. He said, here I can be not disturbed by all the materialistic people who come here, whose stench, the stench of their consciousness is far worse than the stench in this latrine. But he was never affected by that. Or he used to drink, sometimes he used to drink water from a skull, from the burning ghats on the Ganges. So, but we cannot imitate such things. They are on the Paramahansa and they are in the Ragatmika platform of Bhakti. So we have to follow rules and regulations. In fact, Prabhupada was on such a high platform, but he still followed rules and regulations. Because some people may say, hey, Prabhupada is not following that, so I don't have to follow this, right? So sometimes we say, sometimes there's a saying, do as what Christ would do, right? Sometimes you see bumper stickers. But actually even a higher statement is, do as what Christ would want you to do. Okay? Because certain things Christ did, you cannot do. Certain thing Srila Prabhupada did, you cannot do. Certain thing Lord Shiva did, you cannot do. So therefore Prabhupada always attacks, condemns people who say, oh, okay, Krishna danced with the gopis, I'm going to dance with my group of girlfriends. Prabhupada says, okay, Krishna lifted Govardhan hill. Can you lift Govardhan hill? Lord Shiva drank an ocean of poison. Do you want to drink an ocean of poison? Okay? So, in fact, the Vedic restrictions are meant to save one from the false path of mental speculation and ultimately bring one to the point of devotional surrender. As Lord Krishna himself states in the Bhagavad Gita, Vedescha sarvam aham eva vedya. By all Vedic literatures, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is to be known. The assertion that a particular process such as mental speculation is useless, yato vacha nivartante, aprapya manasa saha, constitutes an indirect assertion of the existence of a correct path of achieving the Supreme. As Srila Sridhar Swami has stated, sarvasya nishedasya savaditvad, every negative injunction is understood to have a specific limit. Negative injunctions cannot be taken as applicable in all cases. For example, a negative injunction is that no living entity can be equal to or greater than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But Srimad Bhagavatam clearly states that because of the intense love of the residents of Vrindavan for Krishna, they sometimes assume a superior position. Thus Mother Yashoda binds Krishna with ropes, and the influential cowherd boy sometimes rides on the shoulder of Krishna or defeat him in wrestling. Negative injunctions therefore may sometimes be adjusted according to the transcendental situation. So we find like in the Vedic, so nobody is greater than the God, nobody can become smaller than the Supreme Lord, nobody can become more powerful than the Lord. So by definition, Bhagavan means one who possesses all six opulence to the infinite degree. But you find sometimes the cowherd boys are able to defeat Krishna. Mother Yashoda is able to bind Krishna. And Krishna comes under the control of the gopis. And Krishna massages Sudama's feet. When Narad Muni comes, Krishna seats him in his own bed and washes his feet and worships him. So we find sometimes these contradictions in the scriptures. But when in the realm of pure devotional service, such assertions about the Lord are kind of blurs. Especially in the literatures like Srimad Bhagavatam and the other transcendental Rasika literatures, we find that the Lord become subjugated by the love of his devotees. Although the absolute truth is transcendental to the material creation and therefore beyond the scope of material senses, when those same material senses are saturated with love of Godhead, they become spiritualized and empowered to perceive the absolute truth, as stated in Brahma Samhita. Premanjana churita bhakti vilochanena santas sadaiva hridayeshu vilokayanti yam shama sundaram achintya gunaswarupam govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. I worship the primeval Lord Govinda, who is always seen by the devotee, whose eyes are anointed with the pulp of love. He is seen in his eternal form of Shamasundara within the heart of the devotee. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says to Arjuna, Natu mam shakshyase drashtum anenaiva swachakshusha divyam dadami te chakshuhu pasya me yogam aishvaryam. But you cannot see me with your present eyes. Therefore, I give you divine eyes by which you can behold my mystic opulence. Similarly, Srimad Bhagavatam describes many incidents in which the Supreme Absolute Truth revealed himself to his devotee, as in the histories of Prahlad Maharaj, Dhruva Maharaj, Prithu Maharaj, Karnama Muni, and the Pandavas and the Gopis. Therefore, the Vedic assertions that the Absolute Truth is beyond the power of the eyes refer to those who have not received transcendental eyes by the mercy of the personality of Godhead. So just like Bhilva Mangal Thakur was, materially he was blind, but spiritually he had the most richest vision, right? He could see Krishna, but he was blind. He would be considered blind and not able to see anything. But since bhakti is the function of the heart, actually it's not really dependent on material eyes or material ears or material smelling, material speech. It is transcendental to such functions of the body. So just like, a person can be seeing the same subject matter, somebody who's very advanced in a certain discipline, let's say mathematics, and there could be some very complex mathematics written on the board, and he could make complete sense of it. Whereas a person who's completely ignorant of mathematics look at the same formulas and just look like gibberish. What is this? It's the same thing you are looking at, right? It's the same mathematical symbols, the same formulas, the same mathematical conjectures and the statements, but somebody who's very learned in math can make complete sense of it. Whereas somebody who is ignorant of math may look at that same thing and don't make anything. So therefore, like when we come to see the deities, somebody who has no inkling of bhakti in their heart, they will see that, oh, you all have decorated this statue nicely. Oh, you go through great trouble to decorate this statue. Or is this a museum? They may think like that. But a child who has complete conviction, here, these are my lordships, Shri Shri Radha Nila Madhava, or here is Giriraj, or here is Radha Girideva, or here is Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda. Here's the Panchatattva, here's Prahlad Narsingadev. So the same material, the same function of the eye is there, but somebody with feelings for Krishna, because it's a function of the heart. Right? So therefore it evades logic. Logic can only be applied up to a certain point in spiritual matters. After such point, logic fails miserably. So the Srimad Bhagavatam prepares us through the first canto by asserting the position of the Lord, His qualities and His powers and His activities, prepares us and expects that when we come to the later chapters, that our heart is already prepared to understand the very confidential dealings of the Lord with His devotees. So we can't jump right into the 10th canto where very, very inconceivable things about the Lord happens, right? The Lord's activities with the gopis, with what he does. Or for the matter, how the Lord's name is not different than the Lord is very difficult for people to understand, right? Those who chant very deeply, who have deep taste for the Lord, we have an understanding that actually it is a fact. The Lord's name and Him are actually not different. If you're not up till that point, you have to continue chanting the name, and you will come to a point where you find actually Krishna's name and Him are actually identical. There's no difference. Everything you find in Krishna, you also find in His name. So, but the Lord's own transcendental senses, which are the source of our limited senses, are confirmed in the Shruti as in the following statement from the Kena Upanishad. Yat vachanabhyuditam yena vag abhyudyate tat eva brahmatvam vidhi nedam yat idam upasate. Brahman, the Absolute, should be understood to be that which cannot be ascertained by the material power of speech. Speech itself is evinced by that supreme truth. By the statement, Yena Vak Abhyudyate, our power of speech is expressed by the Absolute Truth. It is clearly expressed that the Absolute Truth has his own transcendental senses, therefore is called Rishikesh. Srila Narad Muni has stated, Rishikesha Shevanam Bhaktir Uchyate. Our senses cannot approach the Absolute Truth by their own power, but when engaged in loving devotional service to satisfy the Lord, the senses, our limited senses must become connected with the Lord's ultimate senses. And thus, by the Lord's mercy, He can be understood. Srila Madhvacharya has quoted the following statement from the Brahma Tarka, Anando Nedrishananda iti ukte lokata param pratibhati na chabhati yatavat darshanam vina. The transcendental bliss of the Absolute Truth cannot be compared to the ordinary happiness of the material world. Similarly, in the Vedanta Sutra, the Absolute Truth is described as Anandamaya, full of bliss. So, we'll read a few more minutes and then we'll open to discussion. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, in this verse, Sri Pipalayana is more or less describing the impersonal feature of the Absolute Truth. The 9 Yogendras were themselves devotees of the personal feature of the Lord. So King Nimi asks his question about the different features of the Absolute Truth to clarify that the personality of Godhead is the source of all variegated aspects of Advaya Gyan, non-dual or transcendental reality. This is also expressed by the following statement in the Shruti, Tam tu Aupanishadam Purusham Prachami. I am inquiring about the Supreme Person revealed in the Upanishads. All right, we'll stop here. Any questions, any comments? There's still many pages of commentaries. So this is a little philosophical part of the Bhagavad Gita, of the Bhagavatam. So we go back from the 10th, we bring it up to the highest understanding, and then now in the 11th chapter, it kind of sandwiches, just like the Bhagavad Gita, it sandwiches the 6 chapters which describe, which are the most confidential knowledge, sandwiched between the first and the 6th and the last 6. Here the Bhagavatam's 10th canto is also kind of sandwiched between other chapters. So just like when you have something very valuable, you don't immediately keep it in the living room. When somebody enters, oh, they will see it. No. You want to keep it away in some more confidential area of your home. So similarly, the Srimad Bhagavatam is kept, the highest is also kept hidden from the unqualified people. But when the unqualified people try to jump into the 10th canto and just think that, oh, I only need to read the 10th canto, then it causes a lot of havoc. So therefore you have a lot of Sahajiya movement, a lot of pretentious groups who claim to be Krishna Bhaktas, who dress like the gopis, or may even dress like Krishna, or consider Lord Chaitanya as enjoying in the mood of Krishna, or groups which don't follow rules and regulations. All this happens when people who are unqualified try to gain access with no qualification into the very confidential pastimes of the Lord. It is very problematic. So therefore we have to follow what Prabhupada has given us, what our spiritual masters have taught us, to follow the processes so that we get a very, very deep understanding of our position and Krishna's position, and what's my relationship with Krishna and how I have to function within that relationship. And when then everything becomes very cohesive, very coherent. If not, many problems will be created by unqualified people trying to access Krishna's highest esoteric pastimes. Any questions, comments, esteemed devotees? Any corrections? Any chastisements? Of course, we go back to our original format of the Bhagavatam, so we just spoke on one verse and we didn't even cover one verse today. Yes, Krishna Kripa Prabhu. Are we passing our mics around nowadays?
No, I don't need a mic.
Okay.
I just want to know where you left off, because I'm supposed to finish
Okay.
parts of this, and we'll see how far I get.
I left off at
Just the first words of the next paragraph. Absolutely.
so I left off here. Let me see. Let me get that.
I mean, interesting enough, there are a lot of pages, but only a few paragraphs. They're pretty long paragraphs.
Narad Muni, Vishwanath Chakravarti, Upanishads, the last, the end of, I left off at the end of 266.
It starts off with Vishwanath Chakravarti says,
Yeah, according to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti,
I know where it is.
but it's the last, I covered the entire 266, I never covered 267.
No, I get it.
Okay,
My page numbers are different, that's why I have to know what the
yeah, so,
Okay, cool. I know exactly what it is. That only one paragraph, and that's the third to last paragraph of the report.
yes,
And it shifts into a different particular point, so that's good. That's
yeah.
where I was gonna stop also.
So this verse actually speaks about many, it's a very, this verse contains many things. It talks about even the mind, the mind is said to be the most amazing of all your faculties if you think about it. The mind in a moment can think about something which is probably trillions of miles away, right? The speed of light is 300,000 kilometers per second, right? Is it 3 times? 3 times 10 to the 9, yeah. So, so the speed of light is said to be, the material limit. No, nothing can exceed the speed of light, but the mind is material, but it can travel way faster than the speed of light. So the mind is a very amazing thing. The intelligence is also very thing. But so even these things are useless if they are not properly prepared to understand the Lord. But the gopis, if you think about the gopis, seemingly they didn't look very like, in the Dwarka Leela of Krishna, when Lord Balaram goes back, or was it Uddhava? They say, how is Krishna behaving himself in the enlightened company of the enlightened women of Dwarka? Yeah, so the gopis considered the queens enlightened, the cultured and enlightened. So the gopis themselves thought themselves to be not enlightened, very simple, but you find that the gopis' understanding of Krishna is far superior to any of the the queens of Dwarka, or for the matter, any devotees. So therefore it shows that the material intelligence has no jurisdiction when it comes to Krishna's understanding. Right? Sometimes you can see some devotee who's doesn't even know how to properly carry himself, or very good in speeches, but speech or any kind of intellectual activity, but you find that this devotee has such deep faith in Krishna, such conviction in Krishna, or such love for Krishna. Right? So it's not a function of all these things. But spiritually there is something called a spiritualized mind, a spiritualized intelligence. So we find like Jat Bharat, he was written off as a mad person. But who could understand what was going on in his heart, what was going on in his mind, right? So we find that these faculties, right, we have all our sensory objects and the senses themselves, they can be used as much as to understand Krishna, as much as they are spiritualized. Right? Some people, I've realized some people, when you give them prasadam, it could be the most nectarian prasadam, but they find it very unpalatable. I've seen it before. That means they are so conditioned by the material energy that even prasadam is not very appealing to them. But you give them some gross stuff, they eat it very voraciously. Just like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gives the example when they were preaching in Burma, in Rangoon, I think, because the Gaudiya Math used to go there to preach. And the devotees there used to cook in ghee, and the locals there found it to be the most repulsive odor. But they have a yearly festival where they collect all dead animals and they put it in a vat and let it sit for a year, and the juice which comes from these dead animals, they collect that juice and they drink it and they become intoxicated. They find that to be the most nectarian thing. So this shows the association with the modes really conditions us in this world to take which is the most pleasurable to be the most repulsive, and the most repulsive to be the most pleasurable. So this is the amazing, bewildering nature of the material energy. Right? So just like some of us, before we became devotees, we may have been attracted to so many things, but now when we look at those things, it becomes very repulsive. How is that? It's the same thing you were enjoying many years ago, but now that same thing is repelling you. What has happened between then and now? Your senses have become purified. Your mind has become purified, your intelligence has become purified. So, very scientific. Alright? Alright, we'll stop here. If there's no other questions, comments. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Srila Gurudev ki, Snitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Hare Krishna.
I know last minute change.
It's okay.
We didn't have, as soon as I found out, I sent
Yeah.
a message to you.
It's okay. Less stressful for me.
Huh?
Less stressful for me.
Okay.
Krishna saved me from, those new format takes some getting used to.
Yeah.
May I come stay outside?
Hare